Hi, this is the first video in a 5-part series for mastering time series in Stata. In this video, I'm going to show you how to upload your data, how to manage the dates, how to convert from monthly to quarterly frequency, and finally, how to merge it all into one analysis-ready dataset. If you do this in Excel, you will waste time and make mistakes. If you do this in Stata, you will have the code you can use for any future project that you can update and replicate near instantly. All right, let's go. The first thing to do is to click the link down in the description to take you to GitHub, where we have the page for the master's class. The most important thing is we have 5 do files and some data files. There's one do file. These are the Stata program files, one for each video of this course. We can download all of these files for free by clicking code and then download zip. In our downloads folder, you will see our zip file. A very important step is to extract the zip file so that it is a proper folder. If you try running code in the zip file, your Stata will crash immediately. You can see here that we don't have any subfolders. All our do files and Excel spreadsheets are in the same folder. We have a monthly dataset and a quarterly dataset. So I've gone ahead and opened those CSV files. CSV is nice because equations aren't kept within the folder. So this is a great place to keep raw data where you don't want equations kicking around, which makes it nice for uploading. We see here that we have year and month time series that start in 61 and go all the way to 2015. We also have CPI, employment, and unemployment data. In our quarterly data, we have the years and quarters of the year, so one number for each quarter. And we have real data for real consumption, so households and nonprofit components, as well as real GDP. So we're going to want to use our real data for real analysis, like things like growth rates. And then we have the same variables in nominal levels, and we're going to want to use the nominal levels for things like ratios to GDP. The correct way to open Stata is just double-clicking on a do file. Never open Stata and then search for a do file. The reason we double click on the do file is because it'll automatically set the working directory. If you ever find yourself copying and pasting paths into your programs, you're doing it wrong because you want to be able to give this do file to someone else who may have different paths. At the beginning of the do file, you can see here some introductory information. You should read every single line of code in here and always have your code filled with notes explaining what every line does. This makes it very easy to replicate and other people will appreciate it. At the very beginning, we have 4 lines of code, which help set up the environment and give us some nice options so that Stata won't pause and it'll print out nicely. So we can go ahead and run that just by clicking this execute command, the play button in the top right of the input window. It's very important never to type commands in the output window or to use drop-down menus. The do file is there to test things out and to run commands. The reason I like using this split screen is we can actually see all of the commands as we run them. This is where our error messages will show up and we can verify to make sure things are running correctly. So I am going to also log all of the output into a output file. So I've called it output_01, and this is going to print out into the folder. The next thing I'm going to do is run this command, which will import the data from the CSV file. It's very simple, import delimited, and you can see in our output window that it correctly uploaded the data. If there was a mistake, you would probably see red. We always want to double check the logic. There were 5 variables that were uploaded and 660 observations. So that certainly makes sense from what we saw from the monthly data. But even though it looks like it's right, you should always look at the data editor by clicking on this little magnifying glass on the spreadsheet here, which will show us the internal data in Stata. So we see our 5 variables and we can see that they all look sensible. The next step is to tell Stata that we want to work with time series data. Even though we have variables here that represent time, Stata is just treating these as typical variables. We have to run this very important command, tsset, which is going to tell Stata to work in time series and will unlock a whole bunch of cool time series commands. But first, we have to tell it a date. So if you're new to Stata, the way we generate variables is type generate, or we can abbreviate to gen. And let's create a time series called zeros that are just equal to 0. A time series of just zeros. So I've run it, it looks like it ran, and if I go to my data editor, you can see here that I have a variable called 0 that's just full of zeros. So that's great. Another cool thing is actually just create numbers from 1 to 660 just by using _n. _n is a cool way for Stata to just say the row number. So here on the left, we have our row numbers, and you can see now that our real is just from 1 to 660. And this is exactly how we're going to generate our time series variable. We are going to generate a variable called month that is just equal to a date, and then we're going to add 1 to that date. So it'll start at that date and then add another month. Then we're going to tell Stata that this is monthly data by just running this command, and we're going to set it as the time series variable. So let's run this all straight from the beginning. Now, when we look at our data, we see that we have our month variable from date starting in 1961 M1 all the way to the end. This is what Stata will use for time series. The next step is to take our monthly data and convert it to quarterly. Since we have more months than quarters in a year, what we have to do is figure out which months are in the quarter and then collapse them accordingly. What we want to do first is generate a new time series variable. This will give us the quarter that corresponds with our months. So we've created a variable time which tells which quarter our months are in. Then we can describe all the data. So it'll give us a variable list of all the variables in our data set. And here we're saying describe the data, but these 4 variables. This will give us a list of all the variables we want to convert from monthly to quarterly, which is just our CPI, employment, and unemployment data. Now that we have our quarterly series and a list of variables, what we need to do is run this collapse command. You can see here that the option that we are using in the collapse is mean. This is going to take a simple average over the months to generate our quarter. And because we've saved our list as a local command and we've named it vars to collapse, to refer to this list, we have to use these special quotation marks, and you know if you've done it right because it shows up in blue. So we have to run all the code at once when we have these local commands. So let's do that. We run this collapse, and you can see now that all of our data is in quarters, and we have 1 observation for each quarter. However, this is only the best practice for things like interest rates or indices where you want to take a simple average. The other options are to run the collapse command just by taking the last month of the quarter. This option is the best for things like stock prices, where your monthly data should be the end of month observation anyway. So by taking the last month of the quarter, you're taking the last observation of the quarter. Alternatively, we can do the third option and sum across all the months. This is the best for things like GDP or for flow variables like sales. The last thing we're going to do is save our collapsed monthly data. This is going to create the file datam.dta. DTA is a Stata database. This is going to have our monthly data that has been converted to quarterly. The final step is to upload our quarterly data and combine it with the monthly data that we had converted to quarterly. So all we need to do is run our import delimited on the quarterly CSV file. We create a new variable called time, which is going to be equal to our quarterly data. And you can see here that when we generate our variable, we use TQ instead of TM to tell Stata that we are working with quarterly time series. We can save this as our quarterly data set. The last thing we do is we can merge the data set that is available right now in Stata's memory with the saved monthly data set by using this merge command, telling it to zip the 2 data sets together using the time variable as the connector. So what we can see here is that we have a data set with our quarterly data and our monthly data that we have converted to quarterly. Now that we have our combined quarterly data set, we can go ahead and create new variables. We can use commands to drop any observation that is less than 1971. I can also drop individual series and I can label my data. Two very useful commands to see what we have is describe, which describes the variables that we have. So here we have real GDP, our components of nominal consumption and nominal GDP, as well as our collapsed variables that are being described as the mean of the original data. Finally, we can summarize our data by using the summarize command. And you can see here that we have a list of all the variables. We're given observations, mean, standard deviation, min, and max. So we are ready for economic analysis. In part 2, I'm going to show you how to deal with errors. Not only the obvious red errors that crash your file, but also the silent errors. Just because Stata doesn't give you an error code doesn't mean you didn't make a mistake. Watching the debugging video could save you hours in the future. Also subscribe to be notified of similarly helpful videos coming your way. Thanks so much.